I'm Jim Rugg.
My name's Ed Piscor.
We have a very special episode today, Ed. But before we dive into this legendary crossover, let's talk about what we have been working on. This is Octobriana 1976. I have been talking about it all summer on the Kickstarter, working on it, developing it, and finally everything is back from the printer and has turned out great. I'm so excited to have this to share with everybody. This first one is the original concept, blacklight, fluorescent ink. Look how bright that thing is. Love it. In order to make digital copies, I ended up creating two other editions. One black and white 80s explosion style, which ended up printing on newsprint, like a real 80s indie comic. Super psyched for that. First time I've printed on actual newsprint that way. And the retro or vintage color edition that looks like a comic that would have come out in 1976, like this comic sort of purports to do. So very excited to have these three comics in print and very excited that they printed well. These will be coming to comic book stores in late August, early September. I am sending out copies to backers right now. And after that, I will put them up online, whatever I have left, once all of those processes are done.
Right now, I'm serializing my Red Room comic on my Patreon, patreon.com/edpiscor. Every Tuesday, putting up some new strips, at least 2 pages per week, plus some background materials here and there. Right now, I'm working on the 4th story, man. It's a EC Comics kind of inspired tale with a bunch of little stories with shock endings that hopefully build to a bigger piece, man.
I love the concept of that one. I'm so excited that you're doing that story now. Very excited for it.
Figured the lettering out. Super fun to play with the hyperbolic dialogue and the melodramatic text and the captions, all that stuff, man. I kind of want to do more EC type things like after this. I have a feeling, man. But $3 gets you the archive. As of this recording, there's 40 pages up there, ever increasing.
Good time to jump in, man. 40 pages for $3 sounds like a bargain to me. But the reason we're here today, Ed, in 1991, two of my favorite cartoonists at the time teamed up for a legendary crossover. X-Force Spider-Man, Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited were you when you saw this back in the day?
Blew my mind, dude. It was definitely an 11 because both of these things came out in November. You see it right there. So they were on the racks at the same time. When there would be crossovers, a lot of times you would have to wait weeks or a month to get the next part. But both of these were out on the racks at the same time, and it was my two favorite creators. Now, there's some trepidation about this, some sadness for me, because you see this right here, this by Todd.
Yes.
Todd McFarlane's last issue of Spider-Man, and after this, it had to be in some of the letters columns or somewhere. Maybe it was even in the letters page, but the words retirement and Todd McFarlane would be in the same sentence. So I just assumed that Todd McFarlane was like some old guy and he was done. And it was a drought of Todd McFarlane comics for me for about 2 years, man, because I didn't know about comic shops. I didn't know about Image Comics until it was like well established. And of course, then I discover Spawn and stuff. But I was reading the Incredible Hulks. You know what I mean? McFarlane was probably the first artist I followed. And when I saw this by Todd, and when I saw he wasn't a part of the next issue, broke my heart.
Yeah, I remember that as well. He was definitely my favorite guy at the time, and it was a bummer. Like, there was no sign of what was coming next, if anything. We have these issues turned sideways because they are all drawn sideways. We'll talk about that in a second, but I like the detail of like the Spider-Man in the box being oriented that way too. Often we point out these little details; they kind of make the whole piece work. And that feels like a classic Todd McFarlane trope. Often he would draw, if it was a direct market, he would draw something in the direct market box. In this case, drawing the corner box to line up with that horizontal orientation.
We're dealing with a couple things here, man. We're dealing with a couple, Little Lord Fauntleroys who just together sold 7-8 million
yes.
copies of comics, and the brass, as they're known. they can't make heads or tails of that. So when these guys are proposing, like, the kids want something different, we're gonna do it oriented this way. The brass doesn't know heads or tails of anything, man. They're fully out of touch. It's a bunch of middle-aged old dudes who are just like, yeah, go ahead.
A bunch of yes men, probably. If they know what's good for them.
Yeah,
this is the bread and butter right here.
To an extent, the unfortunate thing about comics has always been, you could do what you want when it's not that popular, but when it's popular, we now have to be stewards of the property. One other piece about the McFarlane Spider-Man is we can use the wrestling term hot-shotting, and that's totally what McFarlane did with his Spider-Man series. Now, he did a straight-up Spider-Man story to begin, man. It was like, the Lizard was the villain and whatever. But then, every popular character du jour had to make their appearance. There's the Ghost Rider issue. There's the Wolverine issue. Morbius was getting mad popularity, man. So we had to get Morbius in there. And why not have the superhero team that sold more than double what Spider-Man 1 sold? Maybe we'll sell 8 million copies of this crossover.
Yeah, and I think there was some friendship between Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane from pretty early on. Often those New Mutants covers that Liefeld would do, McFarlane would ink. So I think those two had a relationship. I think Rob talks about it in the interview we did with him, that they go way back. So I'm sure they were on the phone, and this just sounded like a good idea.
Jim, there were two camps then, man, amongst the kids in third grade. Man, you were in the McFarlane camp, you were in the Liefeld camp. There was a river in between, and you couldn't put a foot on both sides of land, bro. So this would have been used for the comparing and contrasting of those two styles, man. The other thing that you would point to after this would have been both artists' interpretation of Overkill. You would take Spawn 7 and you would take Youngblood number 7, and then you would compare and contrast the overt kills, and then also both interpretations of Chapel would be a definitive exhibit A or B in your arguments for either side.
That's hilarious. Future videos, right? McFarlane versus Liefeld art.
Hey, man, it's not about competition. It's about cooperation, and we have a crossover to talk about.
All right. Are you ready to dig in? Any other... One cover note, just looking at these. Interesting that they were smart enough to divide up the X-Force team, so none of the characters repeat. The covers kind of go together. I think they go together better this way. Maybe. They seem like they're facing each other this way. But... this is part 1, so I think it needs to be on the left.
You know what? That's brilliant. I didn't even realize.
I didn't notice it until we laid them out next to each other here. But I don't have anything else. If you're ready to dive in, let's go for it.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do have a million things, but we should really dive in.
All right. One thing I note, this story starts pretty much in high gear. Like, it seems like some things have happened before this.
Yes.
And I guess maybe that's in X-Force 3.
It is in X-Force 3.
Which I didn't reread for this reread.
Yes. There's the Black Tom. There's an explosion happens, World Trade Center Tower, and the issue abruptly ends, man. I don't know that it says to be continued in Spider-Man 16 or whatever, but it must.
And there's a nice money shot to get this thing started right. A 2-pager of Juggernaut looking good.
McFarlane, is at the height of his drawing powers. He is a savant. There is cool shit on every page, pretty much. And he could just sell a cool, pretty picture, man. You don't get this kind of thing for the storytelling prowess. And he admittedly doesn't read books or anything, so you can't expect much from the writing component of the thing. But really poppy, exciting drawings are what you're going to get in the McFarlane thing. And there's some microscopic things that we'll be able to get into as well.
I was always excited whenever he would do another character or somebody I hadn't seen him draw, because it was usually a more energetic interpretation. Like I said, I think that's a really great Juggernaut. Looks the size of a building there. So pretty fun.
I like the frame with it's like a panel within the panel kind of thing with Spider-Man here. Of course, we have Cyan Road. He's an Easter egg guy.
Yeah, so that's his daughter.
Yeah.
And Wanda, just almost like a signature down here, his wife. I was a little bit surprised to see those. I feel like that could have been integrated a little bit better. The cyan at least looks like a street sign. Chris Eliopoulos on lettering.
Yeah.
Usually Rick Parker lettered a lot of McFarlane's Spider-Man work and some of this Spider-Man series, so I was surprised to see that. Greg Wright, I think, colors most of these issues.
Except for the ones that Todd colors himself.
Right.
We'll definitely have to cover those. Good debris. Sometimes when you see people do debris stuff, it's just chunks of nothing. But, those are underground cables, some rebar. It works, man.
Ed, did you find Felix the Cat?
I did.
All right, good. I was half looking for him, didn't find him, so I'll be glad when he pops up.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that is one of the things that McFarlane would do. He would sneak a Felix the Cat in every issue, and we would be remiss if we wouldn't mention that.
Very strange seeing the World Trade Towers smoking. Post 9/11, to see that imagery in here was kind of startling. As we go along, let me know who stands out to you in terms of McFarlane drawings on the X-Force team. I think that Shatterstar looks pretty good there. There's some facial things that hit and miss.
Yeah, okay. Nobody could draw those characters as good as Rob. It looks off model if Rob Liefeld of this era doesn't draw them, because I like this Cable better than what Cable turns into.
True.
So it's very specific for me, man. So McFarlane never gets the hair right. That's pretty good Farrell.
Yeah, these two both look good here. Mostly what's happening is half of the X-Force team is fighting Juggernaut in this issue. And Spider-Man happens along, sees this, and is like, oh man, those kids are outclassed. They're probably going to need some help, some guidance, leadership, etc., whatever you want to call it. So lots of money shots of basically a fight. This is the kind of storytelling. I remember McFarlane at the time would say he would draw like half the issue randomly, just draw the pages, lay them out on the floor, rearrange them, and kind of build his story after the pages are already drawn. It feels like this is perfect. A fight, just a big fight scene with Juggernaut.
One of the other tenets of the McFarlane school of artwork is why do something in 9 panels when you could do it in 2? And that's what you get a lot of, man. In order to have your money shots, man, you need as few different individual drawings on a page.
I also thought, knowing this is his last issue, has he checked out? Are we going to see some drawings where it's like, who cares? They look good, right? They look McFarlane-esque.
They do. Like, he starts to... there's a disease where you get like these like kind of club fingers. Those Billy Kincaid joints right there, man.
It also is an awkward tangent, as if Warpath is holding this sword like in his 2 fingers.
Right. Yeah. It's just like he's going to put it in his martini.
Stick an olive on the end of that sword.
McFarlane's style always fascinated me when he would move something really close to the camera, because how do you deal with all that detail and stuff when you're dealing with like these very simple shapes of like a finger bone and the shadow that goes along with that? But it's always fun for me to see how he kind of like zooms in on that detailed style, if that makes sense.
It does, because you'll see it in faces too whenever they're zoomed in. It's like there are so many lines on, like a close-up face that don't exist. So when I was trying to draw and trying to emulate him, I couldn't understand, like, how would you put this many lines? I need a lot of lines on my drawing.
Right, exactly. And what is any of this telling us? And the truth is, it's telling us almost nothing.
Right.
It's just clutter, but it's magnificent clutter, man.
You would also hear about him, like, he'd be talking on the phone when he's inking.
Yeah.
Because it's just noodling.
I think of that. I think of that on all of
down.
this. Yeah, I think of I imagine he and Rob are chatting whenever he's doing these debris and stuff.
I remember this part very well. The cannonball is coming.
Yeah, see, like, I wasn't a fan of, like, the pointy chin cannonball, because that's not how Rob did it, man.
And how many teeth does he draw in someone's mouth?
I'm still deprogramming myself from
It's
that
like
shit.
Andre the Giant mouth.
Dude, and then he just like, this looks cool. So then when I invent the Violator clown character, man, I'm gonna make those teeth even smaller and have even more of them.
It's such a weird, repulsive detail. But I love this moment. Cannonball, invulnerable whenever he's flying, hits Juggernaut full speed right in the chest, man. And Juggernaut perfectly. This is a good use of like the horizontal, vertical, perpendicular, because he is just the immovable object. And it's represented visually by having him in that very static, stiff, upright position and not budging, not bouncing back, not leaning back. No sense of being hit or recoil. That is Juggernaut, impervious.
The unstoppable force and the immovable object, and you don't even see one piece of Cannonball up there. And also, this is like Otomo level.
It's cool. It's a cool
energy,
panel.
man. Where the ground is just getting tore up.
Yeah, really great. And
He would be talking to Rob while doing that stuff too, I think.
yeah. Sending your boy into Juggernaut, getting blasted. I love that Otomo reference, though, Ed. It's a good call. Made even more interesting by the idea of the timing of this, because Akira obviously coming out of Epic at this time. You'd assume a guy like McFarlane would appreciate a book like that and the level of detail, but then we see it pop up in that Spawn Batman background.
Oh, it's in a background of some of the Spider-Mans too, like where he just fully gets like a high contrast photostat of one of the cool architectural pieces.
Some little cartoony details of the stars after Cannonball's knocked loopy. Don't see very much of this stuff in McFarlane or really in any of these Generation 1 image guys using that kind of cartoonish language.
And I really appreciate it. Like I love that kind of stuff.
All right, so I mentioned, awkward to see the trade towers smoking. I mean, this is almost, the first tower's been hit and we're waiting for the second tower. There's another one in History of Violence, Vince Locke artwork, and it's a plane going right at the towers, which meant nothing at the time. I can't remember when that was published, but sometime in the 90s, and then you see it post 9/11, and it's just like, wow, that's a rough panel to look at, and I get that same sense here.
Yeah, for sure, man. Triggering image to be sure. Here's exhibit A, B, and C for like the creation of Image Comics, man. Got a Jim Lee X-Men shirt. Is that...
That's one too.
Yeah, is that Larson?
I can't tell who
or is that McFarlane? But to quote, without paraphrasing Todd McFarlane from the Image Revolution documentary, "We can't get one copy of the shirt." But yeah, they would be merchandised, and their posters would sell, and they wouldn't get a penny. So that was just like another, cut of one of those death of 1,000 paper cuts to get us the heck out of Marvel Comics.
So here we see the B team, or the other half of the X-Force team, along with Gideon and Sunspot. It's so funny to me to see Gideon in anything.
I know.
It's such a weird character.
The hero of the 90s, man.
And Cable's wearing this armor that I'm disappointed to see him in this. I wanted to see him with the shoulder pads. I wanted to see that metal arm sticking out, McFarlane style. I do not like McFarlane's Cable. Very disappointed in it.
Me neither, and we're going to see it on the Money Shot 2-page spread coming up later. But look at this, man. Like every page has a cool drawing.
Yeah. This is fun watching the battle scenes. Again, the rubble, something he's good at, and it's just flying everywhere. Traffic light. You often hear McFarlane's anatomy criticized, and I think you can really see it on display in some of these drawings. Doesn't bother me as a reader. It's still very dynamic and easy to follow and understand what's happening, but I can see where people are coming from with that particular criticism. In my mind, that's proof that anatomy and strict anatomy, not that important.
It doesn't matter. Like, you got to get the basic gestalt. You got to get the basic shape. You got to know sort of how the torso, like, the pelvis is separate from the trunk, from the chest, and you got to know the basic shape of the thighs and stuff like that. But what you put in between, you just got to make those braids connect, and it'll work. It'll work. He has enough knowledge to be able to fake it.
Yeah, for sure. And when you look at like foreshortening, that is the same kind of principle where like you're really bending anatomy for a dynamic artistic reason, and you're seeing it here. It's the same idea. Like you can distort this anatomy for that dramatic, dynamic, compositional impact. And I have found Felix the Cat. I'm happy to report.
Yes.
So very small here in the rubble. Very small. Let's lift that up to the camera. You can kind of see maybe a little bit better there.
That little creature right there.
It's so funny. Like it kind of makes it fun to go back through McFarlane stuff now because I had no idea that was a thing back when I was reading the stuff originally.
Yeah, the story he tells about that is he was going to a comic shop and he met a guy who only like reads Felix the Cat comics or some shit like that. And McFarlane goes to this dude and is like, if I draw Felix the Cat into my Spider-Man comic, like, would you buy it? And the dude said yes. So he said, in every issue, I will draw a Felix the Cat in there, and it's for you to discover. There could be kayfabe, but the sort of extent that McFarlane goes to for his fans in a lot of ways, that feels on brand to me. Like he seems to kind of like go an extra mile in a lot of ways for he sort of knows who's paying for
Yes.
his bills and all that shit.
Another little nod there, Gretzky Drive.
They're going all over New York with this battle, man. Made it from Cyan Way to Gretzky Drive.
It's such if you think of Will Elder chicken fat, this is just so weak.
Yeah, for sure, man. But that also gave the permission, like, we all started doing this kind of shit where it would be like, Piscor Avenue or some shit like that.
Yeah,
also,
I don't hate it.
By the way, I bet all of this was drawn during conversations on the phone with the L-boys.
Some of the line work here reminds me of what you'd see in certain manga. It's just very much these parallel lines that open up whenever you get to the figure. It's almost directional devices to that figure, but adding to the clutter of the debris and giving some texture to the street.
Look at them eyebrows on Gideon.
Yes, the eyebrows are big in this issue. Big one on Cable peeking out here too. Such a bummer. Like that's such a crappy that costume armor that he's wearing.
Yeah, I agree. It sucks. It just looks like a space
Yeah,
suit.
it's the least good Cable look.
And I have thoughts on it because the guy who ran Toy Biz and made like the X-Force toys, all that stuff, like he described the Rob Liefeld characters as being like part superhero, part G.I. Joe.
Yes.
In this era of G.I. Joe, there was like the Space Force, and when I see this, I imagine McFarlane just jump. He's going to be making toys in a year or two. Just going into a Toys R Us and like seeing what the new G.I. Joes are, because they all had these kind of outfits and shit. So I'm like, is he just doing a version of that? Oh, the kids all like that.
It'd be funny to extend this drawing. You ever do the exercise where it's like you get half a face from a magazine and then you draw the other half? It'd be very funny to do the other half of this because like it would not line up right at all.
No.
Everybody's snarling, and I wonder if that's a subtle little dig at criticism of Rob Liefeld art at that time. Where like all the characters are always snarling, and grinding their teeth and stuff, and it feels like it's almost too much. Like everybody's doing it.
It's a tense moment, Jim. Goddamn. I never liked when Todd would do this like shadow but not color it in black. I never understood it. I think I've commented on it when we were looking at the artist edition, but it looks so just unfinished.
It is weird. And he must have had something in mind, but I wonder if that's what he had in mind or if he had something specific in mind. I mean, he has colored an issue or two, so I wonder if he had some thought and this just doesn't work out.
He does this a lot.
Yeah.
And it never, ever works, man.
All right, man. We're starting to warm up here. Some foreshadowing, starting to mess with Juggernaut's eyes.
Yeah, for sure. That's a cool-ass image right here, man.
That is really good.
I would be so proud of myself if I had the ability to draw something like that. And here goes his layering technique that we were talking about in the Marvel Cover Artist Edition, man, where it's like, this is a level of this is a layer of foreground, and then this is, and then this hand is, and then that is, like, all of these shapes recede.
I don't disagree with them. Now I want to see this. I need the line art version of this and then turn it into 3D.
Get to that, Kayfabers. Boom Boom is probably his most successful Rob Liefeld interpretation.
She looks good. Yeah, she looks good. That ship is kind of weird. Looks a little bit like a bathtub or a hot dog or something. Eric Larson.
Boom.
And then there is the big money shot of Cable that should be the coolest thing ever, but it isn't.
Got a real weak chin.
That costume just doesn't do anybody any favors. And then that pistol, too, is not... It's a weird drawing. This whole thing is kind of a weird drawing for me. Like the supporting characters around, but the big Cable shot doesn't quite do it.
No. You gotta have the strong jaw. Like, that looks like his bone. It doesn't look like the metal's covering it.
Right. Man.
I have something that will make you fucking laugh so hard, but it just cannot be said on the fucking air. It just cannot be said.
We'll revisit that one after this is wrapped.
And if somebody says it in the comments, if they say what I'm thinking, we'll keep it in there.
All right, man. Back to the Juggernaut battle of this issue. Stuff is heating up now.
I call this page the straw that broke the camel's back, man, because this is the page that really sent McFarlane over the edge. To listen, the guy's a multi-millionaire at this point, man. He doesn't really have to put up with anything, and he's been told no and questioned about his reasoning for drawing spaghetti webbing and big Spider-Man eyes for so long, and he just wasn't into the editorial mandates of this page.
There's some fun stuff on this page. One, that's a crazy face. Like some of the eyeballs, some of that stuff is really nuts. It's weird to me that we're going this direction and then this direction. It seems like that's kind of odd. But this page, I think, is really strong. I love the sound effect as panel.
Yeah.
We've seen other people do it, Will Eisner, Frank Miller, but it works great here. It's dynamic. And I wonder, like, if he was so excited. This feels like the spread that he's most excited by. Like a lot of these panels are really humming.
Want to take a look at the original interpretation?
Let's see what happened, man. What sent McFarlane home?
All right, this is in The Art of Todd McFarlane, which is a book that we're going to cover in greater detail on a future show and tell video, no doubt. But here's the page, man. Look at that shit right there. Somehow that didn't get by the Comics Code. It didn't even make it to the Comics Code Authority, man.
That is really interesting. I thought the panel that was censored was down here. I did not realize it was this panel, and it kind of explains why that eyeball looks so stupid because of whoever in the bullpen that drew that correction. Wow. Because look, they even redrew this eyeball. That makes perfect sense why this doesn't look right.
Yeah, totally. Like, even the shape of this, like, the fucking dummy didn't, like, they couldn't extend it. Like, you pull this back more so that you could actually, get more of the helmet in there.
This is fascinating. So they take the lettering and they move it and create its own panel here, cutting him off, like at this point on the original art. No wonder he gets mad.
Yeah, and they even had to reduce this. Like, this is probably completely. No, you see how thin these lines are. They reduced this a percentage. Did the new blade, added this crap just real quick, and even the storytelling of this is bad because
it should be squirting out this way.
Yeah, like, oh man, he's accidentally sat on Shatterstar.
Wow. Well,
yeah, like you and I, we have complete, agency over our artwork. So imagine, like, you had to send your stuff out, and then you get it back, and it's like that.
I get bent out of shape for the tiniest little slip, some slightly off color, hue or ink or something like that. I'd be so mad. I can see, like, if I didn't have to work for these people, I'd be done. And that's exactly what McFarlane does.
Yeah, dude, look at this, man. Like, there's not even a thick, like, you see how there's like a thickness to the metal? That ain't even on there.
No, it's like it's a projection. I can't, like, why censor that? Of all, like, you think of...
Dude,
is this really that egregious, considering the contents of the rest of this comic and the rest of this series? This whole Spider-Man series was hyper-violent.
This shit was a
Come
whole...
on.
This shit was a whole page in Fred Worthen's book, the injury to the eye motif.
Jack Cole, man, got us all started on that. Got to go for the eyes. It's such a cool panel.
Yeah,
though.
it's amazing, man.
I wonder if they redrew that eye, if it was just like blood oozing out or something like that.
Right. And like, look at all these lines. This is what we were all in it for. We never saw anything like this.
You couldn't quite copy. Like, John Cleary was the closest guy.
This is like a John Cleary drawing, actually, to
That's
me.
funny. Imagine that's who did it.
Yeah.
But, like, all those guys had their, Liefeld and Jim Lee, Mark Silvestri, they all had their studio of guys who drew like them. And it was almost like you could figure it out. But there was an organic quality to the way he would put detail on this stuff, the noodling. And I think it was just hard to duplicate.
Yeah.
Or to have, like, what's the logic behind this, these choices. I like that organic quality.
I do as well. Good explosion. Not easy to do.
I can't tell what's happening here. He runs into the building, and a building collapses?
And falls upon himself.
But not a trade tower, just a different nearby building.
Maybe that's building 7.
And that's a pretty strong piece there. You get your nice Spider-Man shot and a good team shot. Much more, I like this much more than like the Cable 2-pager.
I suck at foreshortening legs like this, too.
There's some, not his best Spider-Man.
No. Like, the exact mistakes he's making here are the mistakes I make on foreshortening a leg like that. And I don't know how to solve that. Like, I think maybe you got to shrink that thigh up a lot more. And then make this bigger or something.
I think that's right. Any of this stuff, it's like exaggerate.
Right.
If you're going to do something. So this is it. That's his sign off. To all you readers of the past few years, thanks. It's been a blast. Todd McFarlane.
And I was there that very next month, man, and it wasn't him. It might have been, was the doppelganger right before Larson? I don't think Larson comes on immediately.
Yeah, I think there's an issue in between, and I didn't have it. Like when McFarlane left, I left.
Yeah, me too. But I picked it up. Just say it ain't so. Say it ain't so, Todd. But
I probably picked it up. I have no memory of it, but I know I didn't get it. And then the letters page. This is McFarlane, penning a little letter to readers, basically signing off. His daughter was born. Big thank you to everybody. Basically, it's that retirement announcement and why, and it's to spend time with his family. And then he runs. This is like Kickstarter, 0.0 or whatever, because it's all the people that have written in the last couple of months get to see their name in print here.
See, that's what I'm talking about with this guy. Like, just kind of like going in an extra mile that you don't see other cartoonists doing, really, man. You like. Nowadays, people got to pay to get their name in a thing or something like that. And I guess they shelled $1 for the comic or whatever. But he cares, man.
Yeah, it's a kind of a cool idea, and I think he answered some of his mail, like in the previous letter calls and stuff. He would put stuff in there, so you get a little bit of his voice.
He would answer them all when they started up, but there would be 2 answers.
Yeah,
because there would be the Danny Fingeroff or the Jim Salicrup answer to basically tell everybody that whatever Todd just said, like, don't believe it.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, always discrediting Todd McFarlane. And I could see that wearing thin. It's like, motherfucker, part of the money that you're making is because of the money I brought into this fucking company, and you're, like, undermining me.
Yeah, I always wondered how much of that was a bit. Like some of these editors would try to be funny and stuff. But
yeah, go look at the letter where they're talking about where McFarlane's like, I can make a comic without any words, and I don't think that editor was playing, man.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, man. So part 2, X-Force, number 4, Sabotage,
or as William Shatner calls it, sabotage.
First thing I notice, color.
Yes, man. This is the famous one, and we talked about on like episode 2 of Cartoonist Kayfabe, of the Wizard episode worth bringing up again for those who are new on board, man. And this is, amongst us, our peer group, a legendary issue for the color. And, you know, we would assume that there was a reason for it, because it looks like some things are being done, like with some purpose, and it just didn't quite work out, or like Brian Murray was thinking some things. I was out at WonderCon, met Dan Fraga, took me around to all the Extreme Studios sites, and Rob's studio where he did the Levi's commercial, all of that shit. And I was just plying him with questions. Asked him, like, yo, man, that one... in fact, he brought up Brian Murray's name. And I'm like, there was this issue of X-Force. And he's like, X-Force number 4, like, with the weird color. I'm like, yes. Like, what was he going for? Because knowing Brian Murray's color on, like, Supreme and stuff like that, the color there is weird, too. In a different way. You know, just texture, because it's Blue Line. And I didn't know about Blue Line or any of that. So the story behind the color here, and you'll see it as we go through it, is that, and you could see it here even with like this green and just a saturation of these colors. You could feel the ink on the paper. Brian Murray comes from Continuity Studios, Neil Adams' company, and Brian just automatically assumed that one color guide chart, you know, like a key where you could see where all the color mixtures are. Just assume that they're ubiquitous. It's you know, standardized formula.
Yeah, and we should say those color charts, they have a code.
Yes.
And so that's what I guess he would have used.
Yeah.
You know, like the code for this, you know, use this, except that was a code for a different coloring system.
Exactly. So like the Caucasian skin tone, 25% yellow, 25% magenta, and that gets you the yellow dots and the pink dots to make the peach color from, you know, a faraway perspective. And the codes that he was providing were literally 1 or 2 colors to the left.
It's amazing.
So just getting it that off, we're gonna see some wild day glow looking stuff in here. This shit is almost like Blacklight comics or something.
Some of it I like the yellow highlight on the white, kind of neat.
The oddball shit would be like you know, just like
Yes.
these weird green. Like what is that?
You know what's weird are the highlights, because the screens are still being cut by hand as far as I know. You know, this is a pre-digital stuff, so like these little details where you see like little bits of highlight cut out, man, I bet the people cutting those screens weren't happy. Pretty hardcore there. So Rob Liefeld doing X books, I feel like Juggernaut's one of those characters you just get up for, and that's a pretty good 2-pager.
It's a good Juggernaut, but after looking at the McFarlane and you see the compositions of the other characters, I don't know what the answer would be, but you got to do something more like than just
Yeah. It's not compositionally up to the strength of some of the what we've seen in Spider-Man.
But this is dope.
Great. And here's something though. You know, assuming that the eye was getting stabbed, it's the wrong eye. If that had all worked out.
Can you, like, just look at this blade. See, this is what we're going to be in for in a minute. You see that green, yellow, blue, and pink on that blade? Just you wait.
I also get the impression that this is probably a hectic schedule at this point, and you'll see it with some of these backgrounds that are non-backgrounds. And what a contrast. Like, here's some rubble. We had spent some time, you pointed out, you know, Juggernaut climbing out of that rubble and being like, this is a layer of space. A far cry rubble-wise.
Also, the spatial stuff, it's not easy to do to start. Like, and we got this giant character, we got smaller characters, but it looks like Farrell's like jumping way in the foreground because Spider-Man is like behind him, but it's still pretty big compared to him. So like there's all this like spatial stuff that's like Rob he didn't figure it out. Like he's known for doing his thumbnails, like really small, blowing them up and then going over them. And I think you would probably like. This feels like he's staying real faithful to the thumbnail, because like these characters have to be drawn so small, but they were drawn big because the drawing was super tiny and blown up. You got to redo that. You got to draw that one like to size. He recycled the ground from the cover of Youngblood 1. We're gonna see that a couple of times, man.
I like this character design choice of having like the teeth and the eyes visible, but the skin is dark, like it's sunken back in, like it's a helmet and there's some space there, like you'd assume there would be.
Yeah.
But I think that's a cool visual to have that all blacked out, where it's like just the lighter parts or what you can see outside the helmet. It's kind of a cool, menacing look. Good graphic.
3-panel page, man. When camera zooms in.
Some of the green highlights starting to show up is like, this is an interesting color choice.
Yeah, it's like, what are we in for? I'm putting this orange against the red of Spidey there. That's a real cut Spidey. You never... before this time, you didn't really see Spidey cut like that. When Mark Bagley's drawing it, like, the Jim Lee type energy wasn't in Bagley's stuff yet,
That is quite a purple on Domino, too. Speaking of these colors, not that far off in terms of her normal color, but that is saturated grape purple.
Totally. And once again, there it is. There's the ground from Youngblood 1. Like, they're going to move these characters to the side and bring in Badrock and Chapel and Combat and shoot that photo in a minute.
Shoot that right after this.
Exactly. I mean, he's kind of like Brahma from Team Youngblood, if you remember. And I'll show you what I mean by that later. Boom, using that Letrotone with the circle.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Called Sunburst.
That's such a good screen. And it's a fastball special, right? Classic X-Men reference. Normally Colossus, Wolverine teaming up for something of this sort.
Yes, and skewers him on his back, man. So they're just plucking this dude all over the place. And all it's doing is making Juggernaut angry.
And there he is, pissed off. Blood coming out of both eyes in this picture, coming out of his nose, it looks
and
like.
Look at that, that's blood all over. He's leaking.
This is quite a fight, and if Juggernaut's a little bit like the Hulk, how angry is he at this point?
Totally.
Really poking the bear.
And look, like, quite literally, look at this crazy, like, you don't see this green.
Yeah, it's that
in Marvel
aqua,
comics.
like an aqua green color.
Yeah, you just didn't see this stuff. And then it's orange. Like
orange on orange.
Orange on orange.
Yeah, that's a little day glowy with the orange, and the red orange, and then the blue, right? The, complementary color on top of it. And then the purple violet armor for Cable.
With the background as purple
weird.
violet. Like, it's all fucked. It's all fucked.
You see it totally in the face, too. Almost certainly that should be a yellow with the glowing eye. And then it's that same deal of, like, putting your complementary color on top of the skin tones. The blue on that orangey skin.
And then there's a brown in there.
It's pretty wild. Like, I kind of dig it. It's very interesting looking.
And when it's just mentioned at a convention, like you say X-Force 4, like, it creates an hour conversation with the peer group, and also like that would be yellow as well,
And it would make a lot more sense if these orange highlights were yellow, like you can kind of see on this figure especially, where it'd be like, oh yeah, that would pop much more. That's incredible. This panel shouldn't change at all. They did nail that one. Keep that the way it is.
So wild, man.
It's really bizarre, and like if you look at the marks on this, to me, that's somebody's drawing on the color separations.
Right.
You're not cutting out what you see there as purple. You're not cutting that kind of shape out. That has to be drawn in ink, I think.
Yeah, maybe. But like, look, brown knuckles. I do like the idea of like that red, like double lighting.
There's a lot of screen tone in this issue. You see it here and here. You see it in his face. You saw it in Juggernaut's face. And then you pointed out that great, like that burst one.
Yeah.
Pretty fun stuff. Like, this is still Rob Liefeld, relatively young and experimenting. I think this is about the 7th issue that he inks himself, so, or finishes, does his own finishing. And so I think that's probably what you're seeing with some of the screen tones being used, is like, give it a shot, see how it works.
Getting a little bit of the X-Force 2 Hatchy eyes, where we don't get to see any eyeball on.
I think that's I think that comes from blowing up a thumbnail.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's the Feral Wolverine Berserker Rage little circle in the pool of black that we saw in that Jim Lee X-Men joint.
I'm also guessing that he drew the lettering on the Blam Blam. Not all of it, but I think the Blam Blam, if you look, it has the same jagged edge quality of
his ink style.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a really crazy color.
Yeah, and I remember like being very confused by I knew that he was going down an elevator shaft or something, but I couldn't understand like exactly what I was looking at here.
Yeah, you know what's funny is if you were even just to flop this panel, it would read so much more. You'd have Cassidy would be upside down, which would be good for like falling. You'd have the space would be lower in the panel. It'd be a minor difference, but then you'd have like the high space of Cable versus a low space here if you just rotate 180.
Right.
So he falls down the elevator shaft. Cable kind of watches him go down into the darkness where Deadpool picks him up.
And I'm not quite sure how it looks on the screen. It's a little far from my eyes. Jim, I looked at this drawing. I studied this drawing probably into the teens of hours of my life. Because I'm like, that's clearly Deadpool. Like, what exactly am I looking at here? You know?
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I am looking at it now with the same... Does not read.
Yeah, no, not at all. And it's a consequence of the hatching is kind of weird and stuff. But Black Tom Cassidy, when he comes back in the Joe Madureira shit, he's missing the eye, and he talks right here like, oh, you can't talk. Like he got jacked. He got fucked up. And you're looking at a mangled ass dude, but he's so mangled that it's like looking at hamburger meat or something before it's cooked. Like you just can't tell what you're looking at all.
This is an interesting Rob Liefeld mark, this dry brush outline.
Yeah.
Because that's not something that I see him use hardly ever, if at all.
Yeah.
And then back to the Juggernaut showdown. This is a pretty cool page. And the color is a lot of the reason that I say that. Like even like the background with the smoke being off a little bit color-wise, I think really helps that. His weird blue highlights, and then GW Bridge. I don't even know what to make of this. Like this is your Dayglow stuff. It's the Barry Windsor Smith Weapon X backgrounds. I like it.
Yeah, it just looks like different, like, Bear products.
Yes.
Or something, man. Different pills. Shaft from Youngblood makes his first appearance in comics right there. Gives him a stupid name. Balaban.
Yeah.
You at least have an excuse for, like, the weird color, because it's, some screen reflection or something like that, man. But this is, like, when I think of this issue, this is, like, the panel I think of. Because just, like, look at how wild that looks on screen. Yellow in there, a blue mask.
Yeah, it's real interesting. The little bits of pink. It's just strange.
Yeah, it's the weirdest shit ever.
It's funny because, like, at times it sort of looks right.
Yeah.
You wonder, like, where these codes, they must overlap with some colors, which would make sense. I remember Neil Adams would, I can remember reading interviews where he'd talk about the coloring, and it'd be like Marvel or DC, one of them didn't use 25% yellow, and so, like, he would lobby for that. So, it's probably, like, half the chart's right, and then half the chart means something else at continuity.
Right.
So you get, like, parts of it are right, and then other parts are just bonkers.
Yeah, like, I would bet... I think this looks very good, but I would bet that that's wrong.
Yeah, probably.
Because it's more
maybe.
maroon.
Yeah.
Like every other time you've ever seen him.
Or orange throughout this issue.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then this cityscape with the helicopter is almost unreadable.
Yeah, it's
the
very
color
tough.
doesn't help at all. Like you have a helicopter that would be foreground with that same bright highlight as like these buildings that are background. That's a tough panel for readability.
There it is. You don't give me a copy? I don't get a copy? Oh, dude, look more.
Oh, yeah.
And these are the ones he colored, too. My father got a watch. There it is, Brahma, baby.
Wow, he looks like Brahma under that helmet.
This,
So true.
This is my favorite era of Rob Liefeld hair drawing. Like these like little worms that come out the front piece. I was drawing that shit for years, man. And then like all the dudes that have like the Eddie Munster like widow's peak at the tip. I was fucking with that a bunch.
I like this panel a lot. Very dynamic with the diagonal lines there and the way the characters are stacked. I think that one works really well.
This organic, thick, uneven line of Rob Liefeld's is my favorite line. It's Schultz quality ink line. Like it's wobbly.
You're 100% right. I have Comic Scene magazine where like there's Youngblood panels blown up from before Youngblood came out, maybe before he was even colored. So, they were like, whatever we got that we can show. And it has this quality and I love it. And it's a little bit like you can see, I think it's microns, it's markers in that example. I don't know what this is because it is almost like there are places where it's like it's bleeding or something. It almost looks like it's blown up marker lines for the background. I don't know that would make sense, but it is a cool line. And it's something that goes away when he starts working with other inkers, and I like that part. It adds that texture. You can see it here, like where the ends of the lines are a little bit heavier. To me, that's a sign of marker. Just that little bit of bleed on the ends. And with him using screen tones, it is possible he had a couple sheets of this stuff made into a screen tone that he could use. Because you just photocopy that, at a Kinko's onto the clear transparency. I know people that do that. It was certainly something easy and cheap to do. So it's possible he used it a lot and thought to invest in a couple sheets. I don't know.
Well, I mean, he was using like some of the sort of B-lister Extreme Studios guys that you don't think of as being like principals on books, Robert Napton or I forget who, like Richard Horry, like these kind of dudes. They would ink the background stuff, and maybe they're the guys who are applying. Now maybe he said like put a zip there, but it could be those guys who were tasked with that.
It definitely looks like a different line between that background and the foreground characters.
Now I do think that this is all Liefeld, but I think there are examples. I think this is just we're seeing different implements, but on some of the cityscape stuff, even in the earliest pages, like I would bet that those are, Maurrat Michaels or one of those guys doing the inking. In later issues, you're going to definitely be able to see Eric Larson inks over top of some characters, and there's definite Dan Panosian in some of the future X-Force issues.
And again, the coloring's all over the place. The yellow highlights on the face. I think this is some actually really effective, cool panel of a pissed off Juggernaut minus the helmet. But wild, the coloring that's going on there. I don't know how well it shows up on screen, but there are probably 4 colors in what looks like this orange face. There's a yellow orange, there's a real orange, a peach, a dark red orange. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like for an angry human color, this works great for me.
And this is another page that comes to mind whenever I think of this issue with the crazy colors, man. Tell you, man, that's a page out of Octobriana.
Get to fire up the black light.
And then once again, there's just a very small smidge of like the reddest color you could get with the 64 color process of those comics.
Well,
man.
It's unbelievable. It's yellow, red, and blue. It's the 3 primary colors are his color palette for, his armor walking around. Like, you could walk into a disco in the 70s and not have that many colors bouncing off of you at once. It's amazing. I wish I like this coloring 1,000 times better than the average colored Marvel comic of today. Even coloring those backgrounds, that's a little bit of that organic line from the previous page that's being used as like a color fill. That has to be somebody drawing onto the color set.
Totally. Like, look at that as well. This could be the hints of like some early new, computer computer separation, something like that.
It does look different than the other books look.
Because also like look at like the 25% yellows and stuff. Like we'll call it the lightest yellow. you can't even really see the dots. Like, you have to get so close. Like any other comics, you would be able to see the dots making up that color. So there is something extra going into this, some new piece of technology.
Yeah, I wonder how closely Rob Liefeld's working with Brian Murray, or picking Brian Murray, or, you know, going back and forth communicating with them, because obviously Brian Murray comes to Image early on with Rob Liefeld on Supreme. And then also, like, there were interviews where I remember Rob Liefeld talking about the coloring in Image comics from the beginning, and it was like talking to the colorist of how do we get this kind of color, and it was like use coated paper, do this or that. So clearly he was a guy that was interested in it. And the other Marvel books, even if this were right, they weren't colored this way, where you see like several shades, several different colors on a face. That just wasn't the standard at the time.
Yeah, so something tells me that the Continuity Studios ethos crept into the Seps on this, and Murray just like had certain knowledge that the rank and file Marvel colorists just wasn't even, they didn't even give a fuck about.
Yeah, and by the way, this is all speculation, but I want to imagine that like Rob gets this book, you know, super excited to see it, opens it up and sees this color and is like, I don't know what this is, but this is something. Like he recognizes there's something here.
I mean, you know, I have no idea what's in his mind, but I do regret not asking him about this specifically, because I'm sure he has stories about it, and it could go either way. He fucking either digs it or hates it.
It's almost a watercolor, you know, where these colors are bouncing up against each other. And man, I point again at Barry Windsor Smith, some of his color work, because it had a similar deal where it was like, you've got to be painting that onto the color seps. Like, you're not cutting these shapes out.
Right. And then, of course, the bad guys teleport away, and so do
convenient.
the good guys.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Another Shaft appearance in X-Force. And then, of course, Spidey hanging out off the sun. Shot his webbings up to the moon and is hanging off of that.
Yeah, wow.
And this is the shit that I fucking loved, like, because it was like, I don't need permission to make comics, and I don't need reference either. Like, I have some vague idea of what a helicopter looks like, you know? Like, I'll make it up on the fly, and it won't even look this. Oh no, that's the X-Force mobile. Never mind.
Yeah, what is this even? It's like a bar of soap with some little wings.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's Major X's helmet. But see, like, I bet this is like, you know, Marat Michaels or one of these guys.
Yeah, I think I recognize that from Brigade.
Yeah.
I think that's L.A. in Brigade.
No, it's a shopping mall in Youngblood 1.
A lot of stuff going on here. Speaking of color and weird design stuff, this is his armor.
Yeah, he's got like
so
a muffler.
Peculiar. So weird.
Yeah, man. And then just boom, let's get done with this issue.
Indeed.
Draw some clouds, draw a little dot with some speed lines. Boom, you're in, you're out. Let the colors figure it out. Let the letterer figure it out. Ciao. Let Fabian sign it out. And you're done, man.
No, you're not done.
Oh, you're not.
Because you get one really cool Mike Mignola doing X-Force. Shades of Things to Come.
Yes, sir. And, you know, eventually we'll be doing that issue. Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell icon. We'll notify you when new videos are available.
You can subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe e-newsletter at the links below this video. You can find Cartoonist Kayfabe merchandise and t-shirts at the links below this video.
Give these guys their marching orders.
Read more comics.